Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Expressions from Barnmade Games. Expressions is a 2 to 5 player game of being in harmony through, well, clues, but not actually communicating with each other, hence the whole harmony part. You want to get in each other's heads. Well, in a good way. You want to be mentally aligned with each other. That's what you're trying to do in this game. The general idea of the game is you're trying to end the game with more cards in harmony than in agony. And to that end, we're going to go ahead and follow this card over here, which is set up for a normal mode. There's also a hard mode as well, but we're going to ignore that for a second. In the game, let's pretend we're playing a 3-player game over here, just to have a slightly manageable hand size. We're going to set 8 cards over here as the timer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's going to be 8 cards, which are our timer of the game. We'll go ahead and put these off to the side so you can just see them a drop over there. Then, I'm going to go ahead and deal myself 14 cards. Now, the goal here is to kind of walk you through my thought process as we go. So I'm going to teach you the rules, then I'm going to go through my thought process so you have a general idea of what players are doing or what I'm doing as I go through the game. So we have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had 4 already. That's going to be our 14 cards because in a 3-player game, we get 14 cards per hand. We have our 8-card stack as the timer. And with that, I can go ahead and teach you how to play. We're going to have a hand of cards. The hand of cards is going to have numbers 1 through 10 in each of 5 colors. So 50 cards total in the deck. The distribution is going to vary depending on what you're playing, guys. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of organizing in my hand over here. We have 10, 9, 4. We have some greens, a 4 and a 6. Honestly, our hand is a little too evenly distributed as far as shuffling. You usually like to get a little bit of a clump of things going on. Let's see what information we can deduce. Before we talk about the information, let's talk about the rules. On your turn, you can go ahead and play a card to the table so that your players can see, or you can guess a card in a player's hand. Now, guessing blind's not great because, well, right now in a 3-player game, 14 of the 50 cards are in my hand, 14 are in theirs, 14 are in theirs, and 8 are in the pile over here. Which means at any given point, if I just guess blindly, I know the 14. I know there's no red 1 in my opponent, my compatriot's hand over here, the players I'm playing with. I know there's no red 1, but if I try to guess a red 2, the problem with the red 2, because I don't have a red 2, is a red 2 could be in their hand, it could be in their hand, or it could be in the timer stack over here. That's a lot of places for the red 2 to be, which means guessing blindly is not the smartest. Because what happens is, if I can correctly guess what's in your hand, then 2 things will happen. You'll take that card. Let's say I say, hey, Jack, do you have a red 2 in your hand? Jack's going to go ahead and either not have a red 2 or have a red 2. If Jack has a red 2, they'll play it into the harmony pile. Not only that, but I, as the guesser, get to add my own card to the harmony pile. Any card in my hand that I think is a good way to reveal information. We'll come more to that soon. If I'm wrong, on the other hand, then Jack has to play a card from his hand to the agony pile of his choice, and I have to play a card to the agony pile as well. So I have to be very careful about where the cards are going to go into the harmony or agony pile, because in order to win, you have to have more cards in the harmony pile. Effectively, you have to guess right more often than you guess wrong, although it's actually harder than that, because at the end of the game, once these 8 rounds are done, once the 8 cards are gone through over here, what's going to happen is all remaining cards left in players' hands, as well as the clues you've placed on the table in front of you, are all going to go to the agony pile, which means you need to guess right a lot, because by default, a lot of cards are going to end up in the agony pile. So that's the general idea of what's happening as far as the sequence. Now, in order to avoid just pure guessing, you're going to go ahead and have 2 tools at your disposal. The first tool is that when you guess right or wrong, players have agency over what other cards get put down into the harmony or agony pile, revealing information for all the players at the table. The second clue is on your turn you can play a card. When you play a card, you can place it down and you place it in one of 4 orientations, each of which gives different pieces of information to players at the table. If I place this orientation, I'm saying that this is my only red card. I have no more red cards in my hand when I've played this card, which could be helpful information, could not be, depends on the situation. We'll get back to that in a second. If I play this card over here, I'm saying that this is my lowest red card. I have no other red cards that are lower than this, which with a 1 would be a terrible way to play this card because it's inherent information, but it is what it is. Over here, I'm saying this is my highest red card. Again, with a 1, a little bit of extreme over there. And then lastly, I'm saying I have other 1s in my hand. That over there is the only thing that's not related to the color of the card. This says I have other 1s in my hand. That's information for the players to go with. If I have all the 1s, that's a great amount of information. If I have some of the 1s, I have to hope that players at the table can make intuitive guesses around the game. And it's also going to be interesting here because I'm going to give you some degrees of strategy or thought process, but if I give you too much, it can almost take away the charm of learning those strategies yourself as you play through it. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and look in my hand and see what information I can give players. One of the things I can see offhand is the fact that I have a lot of 1s. So actually showing players at the table that I have 1s is very helpful, and this is where I'll walk you through some pieces of information. Because what I'm going to try to do right now is I have to be mindful of what I have. I have a 1 and 8, I have a 1, 7, 10, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put down the 1 purple 8 over here. And I'm going to say to the players, I have ones. I have more ones in my hand. Now that's safe for a variety of reasons. There's only 5 ones. We know that the purple one is no longer in play, and we know the red and the blue one are over here. That leaves the green and the yellow one are in flux. They're wild right now. We don't know where they are. But this is where players can make choices, because you might think, well, that's only a 50% chance. You have 2, you're missing 2. But what I'm hoping is the other players are playing in sync with me. So when it gets to Jack's turn, Jack's going to look at his hand. He sees that he has a yellow one, which means he knows it could be the blue, red, or green one. It's now down to 2 out of 3 possibilities. At this point, Jack can go ahead and guess, because he knows he has a piece of missing information. He doesn't know where the other one is. It could be in Rachel's hand over there, or it could be in the counting timer pile. But knowing that he has at least one piece of information, he is at the very least the best suited, or tied for the best suited, to go ahead and make a prediction. So he says, Alex, I think you have the red one in your hand. And I'm like, I do have the red one. I do. I put the card in the harmony pile. He chooses a card from his hand to put in the harmony pile, and it's going to be a green 9, giving us some degree of information. Now keep in mind I did that randomly, but he'd have more information around what card is a good card to put down to give the players at the table information. Now ideally, as you play cards, you're trying to give as much information as possible. You see, when it does get to Rachel's turn, she may have the other one. She may have the green one over here. And then she goes ahead and she says, I bet that you have the yellow one, Alex, because she knows I wouldn't have played that unless I had at least 2 ones. Unfortunately, she's wrong, because Jack had the yellow one. So she'll have to go ahead and place a card down to Agony, and I'll have to go place a card down to Agony, and this is where I look at my hand and try to think which pieces of information are going to be more helpful to give to the players. I should rearrange that 4 and the 2 over here. I think I'm going to go ahead. I have multiple 6s. I have 2 6s. I have 10s. I don't have a lot of clear information. I think I'm just going to try to reduce my hand possibilities, so I'm going to place this 4 down into Agony. And that's basically the sequence of play. That's the entire game. You're going to be giving clues to other players, but information will develop as you go. On my next turn, when I go ahead and I can either go ahead and guess based on the other person's clues, or I can go ahead and say, hey, by the way, this is my only 8. And I don't actually cover the clues, they're all in play, but this is now my only 8. By doing so, I've given the other players at the table the information that they shouldn't guess any purple 8s from me at all, and all the other players should go ahead and make those decisions around others. In fact, even right now when I have these red 7s over here, if I placed a 7 over here, I've eliminated the purple from being a guess on the table. So as the players start putting together information, as the players start putting guesses in front of them, information starts to develop. You are putting your clues into the table, not just based on what you think is a good clue for your hand, but based on the evolving information that's coming out from the other players, both based on the clues they are putting down on the table, as well as the clues that are entering Harmony or Agony. I say the cards that are entering Harmony or Agony in the game. And slowly through all of that, information starts to develop. And then hopefully, eventually you win the game, whether your first play, your 7th play, whatever play you get to, hopefully eventually win the game, at which point you have hard mode, where basically the game gets much harder. You have a number of players 3, you have 12 cards per player, you have 14 cards in your timer, but you're flipping 2 every round. That's much more cards that are out of play, that's much more hidden information, and they're flipping 2 around, so you only have 7 turns instead of 8, and you're also doing so with more cards out of play, which means more precise information is needed, or just more hedging your guesses around information and false information in the game. That is how you play Expressions. Now, from a pure rules perspective, hopefully you have a sense of how it plays. I acknowledge that this is one of those games that it almost takes playing it to get a really good feel for how it all plays out. You almost want to see an entire round played out, or just play an entire round yourself and be like, oh, I get how the information all comes together as you go through it. But that's Expressions, which brings us to a review, starting off with ease of play. Rulebook is fairly straightforward. There are some small elements that aren't really touched upon as clearly as I would like. Even the fact of the cards, whether the cards go into the Harmony or Agony face down, aren't actually listed in the rules, but they are listed in the tips and advice, where it's like, hey, make sure to use that information. But that's a key piece of information that was missing from the rules, and I had to go through the rulebook, find an eventual tip, and I was like, okay, that's a big deal because of the tip that they gave as opposed to the pure written information. That said, it's a very short rulebook, very clear information overall, just one small note that I was a little confused on, and outside of that, again, short rulebook, short game, the game plays in around 20 minutes to knock out, could go a little longer or slower based on the player count or the people and all that, but I'd say around 20 minutes for a game, and that is as far as ease of play. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the game is incredibly easy to teach, fast to play, and rewarding for that playtime. In general, I don't think games should be long or short. I think they should match the playtime experience you get out of it, and I think Expressions gives you a solid game in those 20 minutes. The box says 15. I'm sure you could knock out a game in 15. But overall, I think the game gives you a lot of solid deduction or teamwork or feeling in sync as you start to piece together information, or sometimes feeling not in sync. You will have times when you're playing this game where somebody's glaring dagger eyes at you because they're like, I told you on the first round I only had 1 purple card. How did you forget that piece of information or miss that or not process the combination of clues? There are times, or You might have times where, I've given you clear information that I have multiple 7s, but all the other 7s are on the table, but you may not have realized that, and so you start guessing, I think you have a red 7, and there's a red 7 in the Agony pile, why did you miss that? So you will have moments like that, but overall it gives you a satisfying amount of deduction, of teamwork, of feeling and cohesion with the other players when you get your vibe going. There's lots of thoughts and things to consider as you go through the game. There's lots of information, both from your own hand, from playing clues, from reading other clues, from looking at Harmony and Agony and seeing all those, or even just knowing what types of clues players are giving. You have to pay attention to not just what's on the table, but what could have been on the table. Why did they do that when they could have done that? Why did they play I have more 7s? What's the information that we can reasonably deduce? What's the information we can know for sure? There's a lot of information present in the game, and you have the ability to influence that information further based on what you choose to discard. If I see that you've played, hey, by the way, you just said I have other 2s. Even if it's not my turn, if I guess correctly on someone else's thing, I'm like, okay, great, I know you have other 2s, but I know I have a yellow 2. So what I'm going to do is, in order to give Rachel that information, I'm actually going to guess a card in Rachel's hand based on a previous clue, and when I do so, I'm like, Rachel, I think you have a red 7. And she's like, I do have a red 7. And I sit there and I go ahead and put down my yellow 2 in the Harmony pile, and therefore I've given Jack the information to know that that was the only 2 out of play, and now Jack can more confidently guess based on Rachel's hand. You're going to have that ability to influence the game state and the table state based on everything that's happening or will happen in the game. So overall, a satisfying amount of, deduction and ability to influence things in the game in a very short, accessible package. As far as things I don't like, there's only really 2 things. I guess arguably, let's go with 2 things. The first is going to be that the game is very static. It's not a game that changes as you play it. There's not varying rewards or goals, and it's a short enough game that there's not a ton of variability to the experience. To me, the arc that Expressions has is learning how to give good clues, learning how to work together as a team, then going into hard mode and trying to persevere past that, which hard mode is hard, but that's kind of the arc of the game. Just difficulty adjustments around the game state, because other than that, it is a fun little light filler game, but it's not a filler game that progresses or evolves with the players. The progression is you figure out how to give good clues, you play until you feel comfortable going to hard mode, and then you go ahead and play it in hard mode until you get bored with the experience. It's a static game, it doesn't change up a lot, and because of how short it is, I feel it's a game that could benefit from changing up a lot more. So it's more that this is just very much a one-trick pony. It does what it does it well, but not a lot changes as you play through it. The other thing I'd say, relating to that difficulty aspect, is I do think the jump from normal to hard is a big jump. And not only that, it's almost an unfair jump, because it's not just a jump in pure difficulty, it's a jump in the inability to get information. The more cards you put in the timer stack is the more information that no players at the table can influence. You could have the most perfect logical deduction, but those cards are out of play, and nobody has the ability to influence it or to discard cards, to play clues based on the evolving information. So it adds difficulty to the game primarily through just luck of hidden information, which is not to me, it's not as much of a fun way of playing through, of enhancing the difficulty. It's like, hey, by the way, you got really good at this, so we'll just obfuscate information, and you have to go ahead and just guess better or guess more often. So it's not just very more difficult, it's more difficult, but not necessarily more challenging for the players to be able to adapt as well. I mean, I guess there is adapting. There's adapting to obfuscated information, but it feels a bit more unfair, even though it is more difficult. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, there is that aspect that's even present in the base game, where sometimes you have as much information as you possibly can. You go ahead, you have a hand of cards, and you say, 6 is my lowest blue over here, and you want players to guess that, therefore there's a 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatnot, but there's always that one card that's missing on the timer stack, and so you do have that aspect of the luck of the draw, of going against the odds, which is, because you have to take that into account. But sometimes you go with a 4 to 5 chance, and you're like, okay, great, obviously you have these 4 to 5 cards, there's one card that's missing, it could be the timer stack, so we'll go ahead and guess it, and you could just guess against the odds. And so that's something that is a small nitpick. Again, to me, it doesn't bother me as much in the base game. I don't mind having some information. I just don't like that the difficulty scaling has just more hidden information in the game. The other thing I'll say, and this is not a problem at all for me, hence it being in the what I can see others not liking, is I don't really get the game name. The game name is Expressions, and especially if you have a game that's like Expressions, and you tell people this is a game about, hidden communication or limited communication, you can't speak, there's almost an instinctive assumption that this in some way has more to do with actual human emotion or expression. The very nature, if I tell you, hey, this is Expressions, and it's a game with limited communication, I think most people are going to infer a certain amount of what this game is, and I think Expressions has nothing to do with the game at all, other than the expression of frustration when your teammate judges you for your poor guesses. But there's nothing in this game about, I mean, the expressions are these. These are the expressions. You have some expressions on the cards, which are mostly just angry faces, or they're different colors, so I guess it just depends on the color of the card. The game theme and name has nothing to do with each other, which again, for me, not a problem. I just like the game, plain and simple. But if you are expecting one thing, you might get another. There's nothing emotional going on here. Again, past frustration. As far as final thoughts on Expressions, this is one of those games that, to me, the overall gameplay of Expressions is a 4 out of 5. I like this game a lot. It is one of those games that I found it a lot of fun to go through that reasonable aspect of trying to put together good clues, trying to adapt to the clues on the table, the ability to discard and adjust the information on the table based on how players are guessing. I really like the sense of control and deductive reasoning at play here. Overall, I really enjoy Expressions. It's a 4 out of 5. It does come with that caveat that I don't know about longevity. If you watch my reviews or my content or my games leaving the collection videos, games regularly filter in and out of my collection, and this is one that's going to stick around for right now, that's for sure. But how long that lasts, I don't know. When I compare it to other games in the genre, I just think that this will stick around until the charm or the puzzle is no longer present. And I don't know when that will be. So this might be around for the next few months, it might be around for the next few years. The lack of variability just means that I'm giving it a 4 out of 5, but with the asterisk that doesn't really change much, so I don't know the longevity aspect of it. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, a game that's very similar in what it does, but with longevity, is going to be The Crew. The Crew, either version of The Crew, is going to have a similar degree of piecing together information from limited amounts of information from your own cards in your hand, but it does so with a different type of challenge, so the challenges are constantly evolving as you go through it. I do recommend the quest, the Deep Sea, I can't remember the names of them, the Quest for Planet 9, or the Crew Deep Sea, Mission Deep Sea, or whatever it is, but that one has even more variability baked into the experience, so the game is constantly evolving and adapting, so even if you're operating the same set of rules, there's more going on to make an interesting game to game. And then another game is The Mind. The Mind does not have a lot going on to make an interesting game to game, but I will say The Mind is very, very challenging. It does have hidden information as players try to play cards, guessing almost the right sequence based on, I would argue, based on expressions or body language in it. So I'd say The Mind even has more body language or expressions or emotional impact than Expressions does, but The Mind is also so challenging that even though it doesn't mix up, it's one of those games that you play it, eventually win, and then maybe pull it out 6 months later to start that process again. In any case, then until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.